What is going on, guys? Jason Burke here, Styles Clash for Life, coming at you on YouTube. And today I've got another edition of The Drive-In, where I watch recently released movies and tell you guys whether they're worth watching, worth waiting for, or worth skipping altogether. Today I've got what I think is not only the most controversial movie of 2021 in the horror community, but probably in the last several years, the most divisive and divided opinion film that I've seen in a long, long time. By now, you know I'm talking about Michael Myers. Halloween 2021. Man, this thing got a lot of feedback, and I think that has to do with the fact that it was put off for a year. It was supposed to come out in 2020. It was put off for a year due to COVID. It was released about a week and a half ago in theaters and also put on Peacock as well. I don't think it's on the free Peacock tier. I think you have to have the $5 or $10 tier to watch it on there, but it's available at home and in theaters after a long wait. And we all grew up on Michael Myers. 'Tis the season. It's October. So this film got a lot of opinions, and I saw a lot of good, but I saw a lot more bad. It was heavily favored in the negative opinion category, and so, of course, I avoided spoilers, thank God. I didn't have things ruined for me, but I was able to go see it in theaters. I want to support horror, especially right now, and especially classic franchises that I love. So I went to see this with a friend of mine in theaters, and man, I've got a lot of notes. I have a lot of good. I have a lot of bad. There are a lot of reasons why you could fall on either side of the category. One thing I don't understand, kind of, is how somebody could really hate this movie with a passion. I saw a lot of hate, like, "Oh, this is worse than Resurrection. This is worse than Rob Zombie's remakes." Come on, man. It's nowhere near the classics. It's nowhere near the first two films. I think it's nowhere near, in my opinion, as good as Halloween 4 is, which I love. But I don't think it falls anywhere near as bad as the Resurrection with Busta Rhymes and the Rob Zombie second remake. My God, those are some of the worst films ever in horror franchise history. But all in all, again, there's a lot to get into, so I'm going to dive right into the credits here. This film was directed by David Gordon Green, who directed the first one. Written by Green, Danny McBride, and Scott Teems. Starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, Andy Matichak, Anthony Michael Hall, and James Jude Courtney as the Shape. I believe the original Shape, Nick Castle, also played Michael Myers at a part of this film as well. So there you go. Big, huge cast. I think there's 130 something people in the cast credits on IMDb. So it is a big cast, and we'll talk about it, but I wanted to get into it here. It runs an hour and 46 minutes, which I feel like is the right length for this movie. And again, this will be spoiler-free at first. It's still a new movie. I'm not going to spoil it. I will give my spoiler thoughts at the end of this review, but for right now, we're going spoiler-free, so I will try and talk around some of the more important spoilers in this film. Runs an hour and 46 minutes, and it feels like a pretty solid length. It never feels like it drags. It's paced pretty well. There's a lot going on. We have some different timelines happening in this film, and they converge together, and I think this is a good length for it. I like that a lot. Gonna start with major positives. Number one, nostalgia. Nostalgia in this film, and that goes with my second point as well, which is continuity. Nostalgia and continuity are pretty rife in this, because without spoiling too much, I will say that we get a lot of callbacks and a lot of continuity with characters from the 1978 film that appear here in 2021, and that alone is pretty cool. We see, and I think a lot of this was in basic reviews and in trailers, so you guys have seen kind of a lot of the characters that are in this movie. Without spoiling anything, you just see a lot of the surviving characters from 78 popping back up here in this movie, and you get to see their progression, how they've dealt with the 40 years since Michael terrorized them, how they have prepared for a possible return, how they have stayed friends, how some of their relationships have changed, how some have gotten closer, how they relive what they felt like back in 78. That nostalgia is the number one positive thing for me in this, because if you're coming to see this film, you grew up on 78. So you're going to get to see a lot of characters that we have not seen in sequels, and a couple that we've seen once or twice, coming back and kind of reconnecting with each other and kind of seeing how the tragedy and the survival has shaped them in 2021, and that's pretty cool. Continuity-wise, there are positives and negatives here in the continuity. We open with a flashback on 78. This is not a spoiler. I think we saw part of this in the trailer, but we open with a flashback to what happened here in 1978. And if you don't want to hear anything about this, this will kind of be a bit of a spoiler part. But in 78, we see some of the same flashback scenes from the original movie mixed in with some new stuff. And some of that stuff is really good and builds on the film, and some of that stuff is not so good. But right away, you know you're going to be getting alternate timelines because we get some stuff from 78. We get some stuff from 2018 when the last film was happening, Halloween 2018. We see a couple things happen from back then, and we see things happening in current day 2021. While those flashbacks are well paced and you kind of at least know where you are each time, again, there are some things that I like about it that are character building, and some things that I think kind of change some of the history of the characters. But for the continuity of the characters we grew up on, and for the nostalgia of reliving a lot of the same shots and characters and moments from the original film, if you like that, you guys will like this film quite a bit. Gore is a big positive for me in this film because for my money, and I could be wrong, but I feel like this is the most gory of all the Halloween films. And it's not done superfluously. It's not just thrown in there for no reason. The kills all make sense, but I feel like this is the bloodiest and goriest that we've seen this franchise ever, in my opinion. Possibly Rob Zombie might have done it bigger because Rob Zombie does that kind of stuff. But this just reminded me of like, wow, feels way more gory than the other films. And Michael Myers feels like he's built very strongly. I like how strong the antagonist is made to be in this film. So I really enjoyed the blood and the building up and the victims that Michael lays strewn about in this film. Well done on the character building on that. And if you like gore and blood, you're gonna like this. Shooting style, I like this. Halloween is synonymous with a certain style that a lot of slashers now have since adapted and picked up and stolen and changed and stuff like that. But Halloween is known for just long takes, like long continuous takes, where you're just waiting and building, or you're following Michael down hallways, long hallway shots, long shots of Michael standing at the end of a hallway, over the shoulder shots with the shoulder and the side of the mask, and Michael just breathing into the camera, and just like building up of tension as victims are wandering around a house in one long shot. I love that stuff, and this film does some of that as well. Maybe not as much as 2018, and certainly not as much as 78 did for money reasons, but I feel like the shooting style on this is nice. It's clean, it's technically proficient, the sound design is good, the shooting is good, the lighting is good. I like the way this is shot overall, and it feels nostalgic to the rest of the series. Finally, big positive, the score. I love the score in this. It's one of the best scores in the series. John Carpenter, they mixed in a lot of the old nostalgic stuff from John Carpenter's original soundtrack, which in my opinion is the best in horror history, and they mixed in a lot of new stuff. A lot of new beats, a lot of new undertones, a lot of new bubbling scores underneath, a lot of quiet tension stuff. They did a nice mix here, maybe better than some of the other films, at mixing in new tense stuff and kind of changing some notes around along with the old score. So you get a nice mix and everything feels appropriate to the moments in the film. So I like the score in this a lot. Let's get to some negatives now. There's a lot to get into. Again, flashbacks. I kind of touched on it earlier. There's times when you're happy to see it and you're like, oh, I can remember that, or oh, they're building on something they did before. That's really nice. Other times you're like, wait a minute, that didn't really happen in the original film, or that didn't really happen in 2018. Why are they adding on to it? So sometimes the flashbacks feel a little too long, or feel out of place, or they feel forced for the sake of trying to build a new story, but they don't fit in with the stuff we know. So it's nice to have flashbacks in there. It's good fan service to bring back some characters and stuff like that, but I think they overdid it a little bit, and I think they changed around some of the stuff. Which goes into my next thing, which is one of the biggest negatives for me of the film, recreating history. They not only did they kind of add on to stuff that was supposed to have happened back in like 78 or 2018, but they did things where they didn't acknowledge this stuff at the time. So for example, I guess this will kind of be a bit of a spoiler, but one of the characters, Lonnie, you guys know Lonnie from the first film. Lonnie, get your ass away from there. Donald Pleasance in the bushes. Lonnie's going up to the house. Lonnie becomes a big character in this film, and they kind of build a whole backstory with him now. He's suddenly best friends with all the characters from the first film, and he's had all this 40 years of building with them, and all this stuff we didn't see him do before. They had flashbacks to 78, telling Lonnie's story, which didn't seem to really fit. They created another kind of a bit of a love interest for Jamie Lee Curtis in a way, which they referred to in this film, which we never saw before. They changed around part of what happened in 78. They kind of changed the opening shots of what we saw in 78 and kind of changed around the history, kind of just like took number two and the rest of the films back out of the canon again, which I hate that. I hate when they change the canon. But they did a lot of that where, like, oh no, you're flashing back to 78. This didn't happen. I watched this film. Any of us that are watching this film grew up watching the 78 film and have seen it more times than we've seen our own reflections in the mirror. So you can't kind of change around the original stuff. If you want to build on the lore and you want to add some stuff to it, that's fine. But changing and recreating history doesn't sit well with me as a hardcore fan of the series. So I can see why people watching would not like that. I have my next note, dialogue / evil dies tonight. Some of the dialogue is ham-fisted in this. I like building like Jamie Lee Curtis being strong, and I like the two siblings, the daughter and granddaughter, kind of being this three-generational Strode, strong, we're going to fight back against Michael. I like the idea that the town fights back against Michael. I like that they're tired of all the attacks after 40 years. I like that they're finally smartening up and going, hey, we're going to build a force. We're gonna have to all do this together because we're all sick of our family and friends dying around here. We don't like this town being steeped in this curse. So I like that mentality. I like building a stronger force against Michael because he never winds up getting killed in previous films. So that's good. But some of the dialogue feels very ham-fisted. Anthony Michael Hall's dialogue in particular. He plays, I guess I'll kind of partially spoiler here, he plays Tommy Doyle, who we did see in Halloween Part 6, but that is not canon for this film. They threw it away. So it is the first time seeing Tommy Doyle in 40 years. And he played by Anthony Michael Hall. And Anthony Michael Hall's great, and he's a good actor. And he played this character pretty well. But some of the dialogue was really just like, they tried to make him too strong and too like unafraid and too like, we're going to do this. And it just, some of the dialogue felt a little cheesy. And the Evil Dies Tonight thing, they built the trailers and sort of the whole impetus of the film around Evil Dies Tonight. And so people are chanting it and they're running around in mobs, and it just feels a little ham-fisted. It feels a little cheesy, and it feels like it takes the focus off of Jamie Lee Curtis in the original family. Jamie Lee Curtis has been the focus of the franchise when she's in the movies the entire time, and the family was the focus of the movie in the last movie in 2018. In this film, you don't feel like they're the entire focus. They're just kind of like a B story to the whole second half of the film where this mob is running around 50, 60, 70 deep saying evil dies tonight and just chanting. And meanwhile, you know evil's not going to necessarily die because, as you guys know, it's not a spoiler, there's another film coming out. Halloween Ends comes out in October. We already know this is the second part of a trilogy. So evil does not die. So you're building this whole thing around evil dies tonight when you know it's not going to die. And some of the main characters are saying Michael's never going to die, while everyone else is saying he's going to die tonight. So it's just, it feels a little bit cheesy and kind of changes the direction of the film a little bit into a weird place. Next note, focus on mob over Jamie Lee Curtis. Jamie Lee Curtis is, again, she is the protagonist of this franchise from day one. Whether she is or is not his sister, he came after her 20 years later, 40 years later, and now 42 years later. And all of a sudden, it feels like the mob is the protagonist here. You follow around a lot of these random mob people and a lot of these new characters who are just kind of thrown in, along with some of the old characters who may or may not have been as connected to the franchise as they are now. But Jamie Lee Curtis, who has injuries in this thing, she's strong and she has good dialogue and she's a great actor, of course, and she's powerful in this. But she doesn't have a lot of the focus, especially in the second half of the film. It doesn't feel like canon to the rest of what Michael would want. There's this mob running around being the protagonist, while Jamie's laid up in a hospital. It just feels a little bit like it lost its direction in that sense to me. Changing Michael Myers' motivation. They do a good job in this film of giving you a lot of different messages. This film has underlying messages and stories about defeating evil and about paying for your sins and about being cursed and about being strong. They do a nice job in talking about good versus evil in this film, and they do a good job making it kind of allegorical and larger than life without beating you over the head with it too much. I like the messages in this film, major positive. But a lot of the time, they kind of change what they're saying in Michael's motivation. At one point, Michael's motivation is to kill Jamie Lee Curtis, like it always has been. And another point, it is to kill somebody else who says that it's their fault that someone died. They throw back a bunch of new characters and create a new sub-storyline, which doesn't make any sense. Then all of a sudden the motivation becomes this other character who we don't even know until this film, who was supposedly around back then. Then all of a sudden the motivation is Michael's going back home, which sometimes was part of the canon in the story and sometimes wasn't. It's almost a Curse of Thorn kind of thing. They don't bring up Thorn, but they bring up home a lot. So is Michael going after this new character? Is he going after Jamie Lee Curtis? Is he just trying to go home? Is he trying to kill all the other survivors from 1978? We don't know because they tell us it's everything at different times in the film. So they keep changing what Michael's motivation is, and it changes the story. And it just feels like it doesn't have clear direction in that sense. The writing kind of was going for too many things at once, and they wanted to tie everything together while still only keeping their original canon. So they're building new canon to fit this canon from the old story, and they're cutting out other movies, and they keep changing all these things to fit their overarching story, which feels like it's an overload. It feels like too much. The messages and the underlying stories are great, but they do way too much in trying to change directions for what Michael's motivation is in this film, and I don't like that. Extra characters meaning nothing. They put a lot of extra characters in this, not just in the mob, but just in general, and a lot of them just feel like they're there for comic relief and Michael fodder. They're just there to be bodies for Michael to stack up. And I get that Michael has to get kills, and I like the gore in this film, and some of the scenes have nice intensity to them, but all the characters that we spend actually quite a bit of time with in this never really get a lot of character building. We spend a lot of time with them, and they're just cracking jokes, and we really don't know why they're there or what makes them important. So they just kind of crack jokes for the audience to laugh at and then just kind of die. And you're like, okay, well, if that was going to be the scene, why not make it a 1 minute scene and have Michael just come in, build the tension, and kill them? But we spend a lot of time with them, and we don't know much about them. So it just kind of feels like they're thrown in there to be comic relief and then fodder for Michael. They could have done a better job either cutting down those scenes to make it more streamlined, or they could have built the characters better while we're sitting there with them so we care about them. So when they die, Michael's got a real victim, and we, the audience, feel emotionally invested. So as I'm going back over this, I'm going to give this film 6.5 out of 10. I initially had it as a 7, and as I was writing notes and all the negatives down and going over all of it again, I went down to a 6.5 and almost a 6. While this film, in my opinion, is better than average, definitely watchable and definitely worth watching, especially if you like the original films, it's got a lot of storytelling issues. It meanders at times, it's all over the place in terms of its narrative at times. The motivations for Jamie Lee Curtis, for Michael Myers, is kind of all over the place. And while there's great moments of good dialogue and good intensity and good gore, it seems to kind of bounce around way too much and try to give us too much info to, like I said, put a bow on everything while picking and choosing what it wants to be canon and changing some of the original narrative. So if you like the original films and you want to know where some of those survivors and characters go, and you want to see cool cameos, and you want to get a great score, and you want to get some good kills, this is a good film for you. You'll really enjoy this. But if you don't like some of the what's canon and what's not canon, and kind of them changing some of the original backstory and kind of doing a bigger story than just Michael against Jamie, you might not like some of the direction this takes. So I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. I like it. It might wind up being in my low-end top 10 this year or just outside of my top 10. I had a good time with it. It's good seeing Michael back on screen. It's good seeing characters that I grew up with and seeing where they go. But I wish they had cut down on some of the building of new characters from back in the day and telling us they were always there, and changing relationships of characters in 78, because that doesn't fit for me. So 6.5 out of 10. What'd you guys think if you saw it? Tell me in the comments below. I'm going to do spoilers real quick for a second, so those of you guys that have already seen it, check them out. Those of you guys that have not seen this, turn the video off and watch it first. Spoilers. I love, again, seeing Sheriff Brackett in the film. Getting back Kyle Richards, who played little Tommy Doyle's friend in the movie, the little girl, I forget her name right now. Lindsay Wallace. Lindsay Wallace is in this a lot. The nurse from the first movie in the car is in this with a nostalgic throwback shot. We get the boyfriend in the first film, which I wish they had done a better job in kind of figuring him out, because he was a cheater in the first film on the girlfriend, and then all of a sudden he gets forgiven, and now he's the son of Lonnie, who's a main character in this film now. So they didn't mention that in the last film. So they kind of just threw more stuff at the wall and hoping to see what sticks. But also, Donald Pleasance is in this film somehow. They took an actor and they did makeup and they made another actor seem like Donald Pleasance to show Dr. Loomis in this film. They did voiceovers and makeup. So it was nice, even though Loomis is no longer with us, God rest his soul, to get a Donald Pleasance visual and voice sound in this film for the original shots. But I didn't like how they ended up the 78 stuff in the first, in this film, with all the new shots and changing what happened with Loomis and Michael and stuff like that. So that's my rundown. We're over 20 minutes, so I'm gonna let this one go. But 6.5 out of 10. If you've seen it, tell me in the comments below what you think. When you do see it, please drop a comment, like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more 2021 reviews of famous franchises. And let's talk about this film in the comments. It's very divisive and there's a lot to go over, so I hope I did a good job of summarizing my positives and negatives for this film. Michael Myers fans, take care. I look forward to seeing you guys for the next one.